So if your company is planning on using artificial intelligence to improve the productivity of your employees, there are two opportunities in front of you, one of which you've probably thought a lot about, and the other one most companies haven't thought about at all. The first one, of course, is automation. The second one is what we'll call optimization of humans. In other words, using AI to optimize humans to do better those things that only a human can do. This is a big deal and perhaps will be the differentiator in the future as we all move towards higher and higher degrees of automation. It may still come down to the humans in the loop who takes the cake in the end of the day. And that's because of this equation we'll refer to here as Haler, H-I-L-R, human to AI leverage ratio. And what this basically means is that once you start automating, for every 1 minute of human time, let's call that a human minute, for every 1 human minute, with automation, you're going to get a multiple of human equivalent productivity output. So for example, you might get 100 minutes of output, or you might even get 1,000 minutes eventually of productivity output. So 1 human minute equals a multiple of that. And because of Haler, human time in the future becomes more valuable than it is today. We think that because we're automating, human time will become less and less valuable. Actually, it's the opposite. Because if you do a search on Google, and I challenge you to do this either now or when we're done here, do a search on Google. Search for how many hours is the typical employee productive in the average workday. And what you'll find is a consensus, which is quite surprising, somewhere between 2 to 3 hours. Now, I wouldn't have believed that had I not experienced it for myself, but my son is a data scientist. I'm a AI solutions architect here in Spira, and we work together, and over the last 10 or so years, we've hired over 2,000 people. And we've seen firsthand how people operate. So and if you're a manager and you manage a team of any size, this will resonate with you a lot. You know, some people are rock stars and they're just amazing. Don't need any supervision at all. Others just need a ton of supervision, ton of retraining, and anyway, you know the shenanigans people get up to if you're a manager. All I can tell you is that we don't need a survey to tell us how inefficient people are in general. We don't need Google to tell us. We've seen that firsthand, and that's really what motivated us to start Inspira and start developing some of these solutions as our own teams try to improve them. And we, in the end, discovered that AI is probably the only thing that can save us. So Haler, 1 minute of time equals 1,000, and if you look at those stats, 2 to 3 hours a day that that the average employee is truly productive. Here's the opportunity. That leaves 5 to 6 hours out of an 8-hour day that are potentially recoverable. Okay, now you'll never recover every minute of every day, obviously, but you don't need to recover every minute of every day in order to create substantial competitive advantage. If you improved productivity across the board by 10, 20, or 30%, even today without automation, that would be enough to skyrocket your bottom line and totally change the game in terms of your productivity output. But in the future, this is where it gets extraordinarily important to pay attention to this, because if you lose just 1 minute of productivity in the future, you don't lose 1 minute of productive output, you lose 100 minutes of productive output, or you may lose even more, 1,000 minutes or even more, as the compute power scales, as AI gets more and more powerful and more smarter. The smarter it gets, the greater this multiple is going to become. So don't ignore optimizing your humans. It's important today. And by the way, automating tasks, the problem with that is that it's very time consuming. If you've been at this for a while, you'll know that how many things have you actually automated in your company. probably not many companies have automated that much. If there's 100% of work, some companies maybe have automated 0.05%, others maybe a little bit more. You get the point. Automation it's a hard road. It's going to take us a long time. It's expensive, and we still have to do it. We have to chip away at it and work towards it, because that is the future. Okay, but this is available right now. Okay, and maybe you can't double your productivity right now, but I guarantee you can get 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50% from many of your people. I mean, the very first experiment we did on this was in February 2023. And we unleashed, for the very first time, we unleashed our very first pilot test on only 3 of our team members. Okay, we were scared. We didn't know what was going to happen. And basically, we had an AI manager who was essentially like a chatbot, okay, like we have today, but with a little bit more business intelligence. And it was monitoring these 3 people for behavioral anomalies, looking for opportunities for optimization. And in the first week, it identified behavioral anomalies from 2 of those people, and it then intervened and had a conversation, not as good of the conversations we can have today, but a conversation still the same, asking them about their behavior and could they change their behavior in order to improve productivity. All right, here's what we found. Again, it's only 2 people, okay, that it discovered. So this isn't science. This is just anecdotal. But the point here is it gave us great hope, because the first person, their productivity after the intervention by the AI manager, asking them why they were performing that way and could they do better, that person, I think it took 2 or 3 different conversations, and their productivity went up by 47%, and it stayed there. The other person, her productivity went up by 79%, and it stayed there. Months later, we checked it the following September, and it was on average 79% higher than it was before the management intervention. So the AI manager basically is a new invention that is available to us today. It can do some of the work of a frontline supervisor. In other words, it can watch people work. It can watch what they do. And what's really remarkable about this is it can spot patterns and trends that human supervisors can't even spot. For example, let's just say a habit is just emerging, and the habit is the person starting to come in later and later. And you might think that's a trivial use case, but my uncle while he was working, he's retired now, but he's a chartered accountant, and he had a large accounting firm. And one of his secretaries, it turns out, had been taking an extra half hour for lunch every day, and he didn't know about it. This went on for years. And finally, somebody told on the secretary and said, this has been happening for years. My uncle approached her and said, I understand you've been doing this, and the person actually admitted it. And so my uncle gave her a choice. He said, you can either pay back all the money you stole from us, or you'll get fired. What do you choose? So I'll bet you can predict what she did. She quit, and that was the end of it. Now, as I don't know, what my uncle's business strategy was there, but my approach would have been, I would have thought about the cost of hiring, the cost of training, and the cost of getting that person to the level of experience she was at. And I know those costs are not insignificant and they're not trivial. And so, my preference would be to save that person rather than fire them. Okay, yeah, she's dishonest, but you know what? Most people are dishonest given the opportunity. So I don't think that was anyway. The point here is, wouldn't it have been nice if my uncle's observation system was so tuned in that he caught her on her first day or her second day or her first week, right? So instead of waiting for it to mount up 2 years worth of bad behavior, he could have intervened and nipped this thing in the bud. And that's what an AI manager can do. It can spot our behavior very early on, even before habits become visible. And the AI manager now can have conversations. Just give me an example. I'll give you an example of how this works. So first, you install software called Whisper. Okay. And by the way, this is for people who primarily work on computers. Okay, so if your people work most of their day or much of their day on a computer, then this would work for you, for your company. Whisper is silent software. It works in the background. You can install it on any Mac or a Windows PC, and it just starts collecting copious amounts of data, as much data as possible, not personal data, okay, just behavioral data like user inputs, all the things they're looking at, the websites, the applications, and so on. And so it doesn't intentionally collect any personal data, but it will collect all data during those work hours. All right, now the reason you want copious amounts of data, and by the way, we collect tens of thousands of bits of data from every employee every single day, and this is because AI needs data like a car needs fuel. Okay, the more data you feed it, the more opportunities it can find for you, and it can find them in the most amazing ways. So just as an example, one of the metrics we can pull out of the data out of every day, we call this P-score. Oops. P-score stands for productivity score, and it is a patent pending algorithmically generated metric that we calculate for every employee every minute of every day. Okay, and what the P-score is it represents that person's contribution towards the value that the company generates. So for example, their contribution towards deliverables, or their contribution towards the primary outputs that that particular person is expected to contribute to. And that's what it measures. And the P-score, when you look at it in aggregate, so for example, summarize that 1 per 1 minute graph and that metric, and do this instead by the hour or by the day. Just watch this. So we'll draw a few of these bar charts, okay? And a typical example that I often show people when I'm not on the board here is I'll show you a score that's here at 400 and here at 25. Now, if that truly represents their contribution towards value in the corporation, you would want to ask yourself, or any reasonable manager would want to ask yourself, well, what's the difference between 400 and 25, right? And the beauty of the system is because it's based on data, not just subjective opinion from somebody, it's based on data. You can look in behind each of the bar charts and you can see what is driving that data. And you can see what is contributing least and what is contributing most. And you can see the habit patterns over time as the person goes throughout their work day and day after day. And so imagine any human manager looking at a productivity score and being able to see what is contributing towards the true productive contribution of value that that person is making, and then being able to look at the data and instantly start getting ideas on how to coach that person towards better productivity. And that's exactly what it does. Now, if you think a human manager is smart and can do that, which they can, imagine how much AI can do with it. And that's the future. That's the true future, because our AI managers, even today, even in March or February 2023, all the way through to today, they've just continued to get smarter and smarter and smarter and more efficient. And now they can spot patterns long before a human can spot them. And it can do this. It can send the user a message, and it can say, hey, I've noticed some irregularities in your punctuality. Okay, let's use that as an example. You've been here for 2 years, you've been great, but I've noticed recently some slight irregularities. I want to have a chat with you about these, okay? Here's a link to my booking calendar. Book an appointment with me. Keep in mind, this AI manager that reached out to them is an AI manager, okay? Not a human, it's an AI manager. So the human being, sorry, the human employee says, oh, this AI manager wants to have a conversation with me. They click the booking link, they book an appointment, what is suitable for them. And then the AI manager sends them a follow-up message with a booking link and says, okay, great, we're all booked in. Now, what happens between that time, between the time the person booked and the time of the meeting, is the employee is thinking, what does he want to talk to me about? He's noticed some irregularities or some deleterious metrics that are not contributing as expected by the company, and he wants to have a chat with me about this. And what happens is the employee has an experience of some anxiety. And that anxiety works for you because now they're thinking, if they know what this is, they're already thinking of excuses, right? They're thinking not just of excuses, but how can they cover their tracks? And most certainly, how can they prevent this from ever coming up? So even before the meeting happens, there's some anxiety-driven behavioral change activated. And for some people, it's going to be small. And for some people, it'll be huge. It really depends on the temperament of the user. So the person gets a reminder from the AI manager with the link. They click the link. They show up in the meeting room, which is inside our web application, and the AI manager greets them either by voice or in a chat bot. Your decision. Okay, and it says something like this: "Hey, John, I've noticed some irregularities in your punctuality recently, and I just wondered, is everything okay with you?" The AI manager can approach this with a degree of empathy that a normal human supervisor would. Okay, you don't hit somebody over the head. You ask them if everything's okay. At least in the very first time this happens. In the first incident, you would say, is something going on? And the human might say something like, well, it's back to school time of the year, and I'm, getting the kids out of the house has been difficult. And, so that's what's been happening. And the AI manager said, oh, you know what? I totally understand that. I get that it happens to everybody, and it is a busy time of the year. But can you do better? Is this just temporary? Will you be able to, remedy this? And John would say something like, yeah, absolutely. No problem. Okay, so they end the meeting, they say goodbye, and that's it. Now, if the issue recurs, if the metrics don't change, AI manager sends another notice to John and says, hey, I'd like to chat with you again about your, about your punctuality and your reliability metrics. Can we book another meeting? So John books another meeting. He shows up at the meeting, and AI manager greets him and says, hey, John, we had that conversation a couple of weeks back about your punctuality, and you mentioned that it was your children just getting back to school. So can I ask you, are your kids back to school? The AI manager can reference not just the last conversation, every conversation he's ever had with the employee on this topic, and he's able to weave that whole history into today's conversation. And the elegance of these conversations is just getting so powerful that it's shocking. And in the future, though, I think the conversations are just going to be masterful, even more so than today. But even today, they're powerful. So the reason for this is because a lot of times employees will do things because they think that nobody's watching. Or even if they think and know somebody's watching, they think that nobody cares. And so in that very first meeting, what you're doing is you're putting them on notice that A, you see, and B, you care. Okay, that's the message for the employee. They're seen, and this is an issue that we care about. It's important. It's important. And so the second conversation happens. Now, hey, John, did your kids get back to school? And John says, yeah. He says, I'm just got myself into a little bit of a habit of, getting out late, but I promise I'll solve this. And this time the AI manager is just a little more stern with John. Says, listen, good, because this is really, really important to our entire company that you set an example for everybody around you. And not only that, did you know that, if you show up late and consistently show up late, people begin to look at that and begin to wonder, if you can be relied upon to fulfill your other promises. Because if you're not fulfilling your promise to show up on time, how about the other promises? And so they begin to doubt maybe, how capable you are of living up to your promises. Do you see how the connection there? And John might say, yeah, I actually never thought about it like that, but yeah, absolutely. Don't worry, I'll fix this. Okay, so the conversation's over. Let's say John does not change his behavior. Either he's not capable of or whatever. And so now a third conversation happens. And we like to do 1, 2, 3 strikes and then escalate. And I'll show you what escalate means in a second. So 1, 2, 3, and the third strike is, John, we've had this conversation twice in the last month. This is, I really expected, based on your promises, I expect you to solve this by now. We just can't keep going this way. There is going to be some consequences if you can't fix this. So, do we need to change your schedule to match your new lifestyle, or what do we have to do here to fix this? Because I can tell you that this can't go on. Okay, so here's the sequence. First intervention is we see and we care. Second intervention, we see, we care, and we will not tolerate this behavior. The third intervention, we see, we care, we won't tolerate it, and here's a threat. There's going to be consequences, whatever that is, okay? Whatever degree of threat you want to make, it's disrupting to the team, and therefore we just can't let it go on. There will be consequences, and so I really need you to fix this. Can you do that? John says yes, and now it moves on to, so first off, let me just say, the reason we start slow like that is because these people are human beings, they're professionals, okay? We put our trust in them, they put their trust in us, and they deserve the benefit of the doubt in the first conversation. A, you don't want to micromanage people. B, you don't want to assume anything. It might be some problem with somebody's schedule. In that case, they might have a lifestyle issue. Maybe they had to move to a different part of the city, and now it takes them longer, and there's unexpected traffic delays, and maybe they want to start an hour later and work an hour later, or something like that, or maybe work an extra hour from home or something. You get my point. Is that you need to be flexible and treat people with the degree of professionalism that you yourself would want to be treated, and that's exactly what the AI manager does. So now we can engineer the conversations differently for your company. If you want to get right to the point and hammer somebody, that's fine, I guess. But most professionals we find is that if they're treated like professionals, they'll act like professionals, and so we treat them like that. Well, let's just say John still doesn't change his behavior. Okay. 1, 2, 3 strikes, and then escalate. What happens here is the AI manager escalates this to a human manager and says, hey, I've had 3 confrontations, 3 interventions with John in the last 6 weeks. Here's the transcripts. Here's the date we met. I think this is time for you to have a chat with John and really hammer home how serious this is. Now, let me tell you, many people on the very first intervention will fix themselves just like that. A larger group will fix themselves on the second intervention, and yet another group will fix themselves on the third intervention, and a slice of them will need to escalate to a human. By the time the human thing comes around, it's like, they've already had 3 confrontations. They already know that we see, we care, we won't tolerate it, and there's going to be consequences. Do you really want somebody like that on your team? Okay, again, my preference and our preference is that we save these people, because you put the time and effort and money into recruiting, training, and getting them that institutional knowledge that has got them to the place where they can be effective and they can be productive. So let's try to save who we can save. Let's try not to lose anybody. And that that deserves some clever architecture of the approach on how, and it really depends on the exact issue that you're talking in. And by the way, I'm talking here a lot about habit change, and that's because and identification of habits, and that's because to a large degree, whether our productivity is low or high, it is a derivative of our habits. Okay? And everybody has their own habits at work and at home. Like, somebody wakes up, the alarm goes off at 5. One person will shut the alarm off, get up, splash some cold water on their face, and then go do 10 push-ups. That's their habit. Okay. Other people will hit the snooze on their alarm clock and roll over and go back to sleep for 5 minutes. Right. So we have habits at home and we have habits at work, and some of them are good and not all of them are good. Right. And so being able to have AI managers that can coach people without every single little thing being pushed onto the human managers like they are now. I don't know about you, but our supervisors are all overwhelmed. They're all at their limit. Trying to get them to pay attention to all these details is like asking them to, climb the Eiffel Tower or something. It's difficult. They just don't have the time in the day. So AI managers can really fill the gap for our human supervisors, and the human supervisors continue to do the normal performance reviews and the normal planning and delegation and all the stuff they normally do. They just don't have to do every little thing. And by the way, AI managers aren't just good at detecting habits, they're good at detecting real-time incidents. So for example, if you got a brand new employee, and you're trying to teach them the ropes, what is your corporate culture, the very first time they're late, you would want an AI manager to step in and say, hey, you're late, this is your second day at work, what's going on here, right? And do that in a professional language. What you're doing is you're telling them, it's we see, we care, and we won't tolerate. You do that right out of the gate with a new employee, right? I mean, who wants their new employees showing up late in the day and misbehaving right out of the gate? You want them to form good habits. And so you can use the AI managers to train, to onboard, and then to kind of do a lot of this frontline monitoring and observability thing. Like I just think back to my, like, again, to my uncle. Wouldn't it be great if he had spotted the problem, on the first day or the first week, rather than waiting for 2 years? He would have saved that person and saved the grief. So you get Whisper, get as many people on as you can. It's absolutely free. Okay, get on there. It's a pilot program, and it's designed to reveal the behavioral patterns and trends and benchmarks and anomalies of your team. So put as many people as you can on it, and you can get through it in a few weeks, and then you look at the data and you'll be amazed. And so here's what you're going to, in the end, what you'll be able to do is you'll look at this data, and your humans will be able to get ideas on, your human supervisors, that is, be able to get ideas on what to do to improve performance of the team just by looking at the data. It's really quite remarkable. But what's extraordinary is that when you get to the time when you can start implementing AI managers, and just think of the times you can save and the people you can save, and the better performance you can get. And like I said, in our experience, we've seen some just remarkable turnarounds in our people without losing people, by the way. And so the AI managers is not a free service. Well, Whisper is, and the data that comes out of it. AI managers is a paid service. And my son and I developed this along with our team. we spent now years at this, and so it's not free, but it's really not expensive compared to task automation. It's a fraction of that cost, and it can be done much quicker than task automation. If you want to do task automation through the very same mobile app, desktop app, and web app that we have, that we give to all of our clients, you can activate our personal assistant, and the personal assistant can perform a multitude of tasks for you just by telling it, go do this, go do that. I was laying in bed the other day, and I got a notice from my assistant saying, "Hey, you don't have a work schedule for next week, and can you create one now?" And I just said, without getting out of bed, I just said, "Go create one for me. I want to work from 9 to 5 next week. Let everybody know." And it went and published that schedule for me, and literally in seconds. I didn't even have to get out of bed to do it. And I'm now doing work from the beach, from the car, from the living room, and it's quite remarkable. So that comes with the package once you've got the AI managers and you're kind of integrated into our platform. But get started with Whisper. It doesn't cost anything, and the metrics you're going to get out of that probably will blow your mind.